Thank you for joining me for this tutorial, how to use events in Servoy. In Servoy, there's lots of different kinds of events. We have solution-based events for loading and error handling. There are form-based events, both for the actual form itself when it loads and unloads and when you start editing. There's also menu command events. So when the user chooses something from the menu, you can basically hijack the default behavior, so for finds and new records, etc. And there's also object-based events. So down to the object level, you have focus events, change events, and there's special events on buttons and labels. So with all of these events, what the heck can you do with them? The purpose of having all of these events is to allow you to change the graphical user interface at runtime. And you can either attach global methods or form-based methods to any event. This allows you to enforce business rules, to enforce data entry rules, to create your own security scheme, and to add intelligence to your own solutions. Enough talk. Let's go over to Servoy Developer and see how it works. The first layer of events we're going to talk about are at the solution level. Over in the Properties panel, you can see that there's an onClose, onError, and onOpen event. This is helpful for running one-time setups, for changing out style sheets, and also for having a centralized error handling routine. If you attach a method to the onError event, for example, every error that comes up in the GUI is going to pass through that one method, so you can do all of your error capture in one place. The next level that we have events is at the form level. And down here in the events section are all of the events that fire on the form itself. So when it hides, actually just before the form hides, on load, so this only runs one time per form when it's first loaded, on record edit start, on record edit stop, on record selection means as they change rows, on show will fire just before the form is shown, so you can set things, disable them, hide them, color them, and on unload. So the unload event is helpful for things like keeping track of a history so people can go back and forth, etc. The next layer of events is on the actual form objects themselves. Fields, for example, you have onAction. When your field is formatted as a text field, which is the default, and the user hits the Enter key, it will trigger the onAction event. Likewise, if they click a button, that click is the action for a button object. The next event is onDataChange, and that becomes very interesting when you're going to do things like try to create dynamic pop-up menus or hide or disable fields when you're on a dialog box to enforce data entry rules. You have onFocusGain, which is when they click into the field, and onFocusLoss when they leave the field. On label, you have the onAction, which is generally the click event. But you also have on double-click and on right-click. This works only in the smart client or the native client, and it doesn't work over on the web client. All right, let's create a very simple example on how to use some of these events during runtime. I've created a simple method on my customers form called Highlight City. And here I'm going to go over to my method edit perspective that basically just hides the functions for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to take my city field and we're going to color to color if the city is London. I'm going to come over to my customers form and expand it. And here on my elements, I'm going to expand that node, and I see FLD City. This is the name that I've given to the field object. So you have to give it a name in the name property of all of the elements that you want to show up under this elements node. So if I click on Field City, down here below I can see all of the attributes and properties and functions that I can do to that object at runtime. And one of them is set or get the background color. So I'm going to double-click BG Color, and Servoy will automatically go ahead and put it up here for me. Now I'm going to say equals, and I want to change the color to a different color if the city is London. So the first thing to do is let's just change the color. And Servoy uses hex colors or web colors. So if I know the color that I want, I can type it in, or I can come up to the Edit menu and choose a color chooser. Let's make it a bright yellow. So I'm going to save this by doing Control-S for save. All right, now we'll go launch it in the Smart Client and see how it looks. So here I have the Smart Client. I can go to the Methods menu and click Highlight City. And so it turns a bright yellow. All right, but now we want to add a condition. So we're going to come back to our method here, and we're going to put in an if statement. The if statements are found down here in the JavaScript library. So if I expand JavaScript library, click on Flow Control, I can double-click If Else, and Servoy will put in the correct syntax for me. So I'm going to say if the city, and you need to put in a double equal sign because that's a comparison operator. If it equals London, then I want this field to go yellow. So I'm going to take this, highlight it, do Control X for cut, Control V for paste, and then I'm going to say if it's not London, then make it white. So I'm going to do Control V for paste again, and I'm going to change the color to white, which is 6Fs. And I'm going to save that again, Control S for save. Now let's see what that does in the Smart Client. So here I have Berlin, so we would expect the field city to go white. Let's choose our column. Yes, it goes white. As I change records here, let's go to London, and we'll run it again. And yes, it turns yellow. Now that's all fine and good, except we don't want our users to have to go up and choose a method. We want it to automatically happen as they change rows. So let's attach this method to an event on our form and have it happen automatically. All right, I'll go back to my form and go back to my form design perspective. And the event that we're going to use is onRecordSelection. And now it shows me that I have a form method called Highlight City. I'm going to choose that one and say OK. Now we need to save the form again, Control S. And now let's view it in the Smart Client. Here it's already white, and as I go through and change rows, it turns automatically to London because that method is fired automatically every time that onRecordSelection event is fired. This will also work exactly the same way in the web client. So let's go ahead and fire up the web client and see how it looks there. So here I have exactly the same form that I was working on, and as I change records, it works exactly the same in the web client as it does in the Smart Client. Well, that's a brief overview on how to use events in Servoy 4. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.